All right. Hello, everybody. Um, Tonight we are going to talk with Mr. Sam Gomez. He's going to be our speaker this month for the Memphis Python user group, and he's going to be talking about infrastructure. Let me find the banner here that I made. So we talking about infrastructure as code, ARM, bicep, knees and toes infrastructure as code for beginners. Sam, how are you this evening?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining us for to have a quick chat about your talk. Why don't you introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. My name is Sam Gomez. I'm currently a technical lead at a consulting company called Jenica. I've been doing software development for 13, 14 years now, mostly on the Microsoft stack. But I've also delved a little bit into other technologies, kind of like a infrastructure as code, like the talk that we're going to have in a couple weeks.
And that talk is going to be 2 weeks from tonight. It'll actually be an hour earlier than we are right now. It's at 6 p.m. Central Time. Uh, this is uh, this is the short link to the meetup page where you can RSVP, get the link to the Teams meeting, which I think I've put up there. If it's not up there, it will be up there soon. But you do need to RSVP to get the link. So Sam, where are you from again? I forget where you're from.
I'm in Columbus,
You're in okay,
Ohio.
Columbus.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, so oh yeah, I know quite a few people up in Ohio. Oh yeah, so Matt Groves is up there,
Yep.
and then of course Sarah Dekavich is up in Cleveland. Phil
Mhm.
Japixie's over in Cincinnati. So yeah, lots of good developers up in Ohio. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So why don't you go ahead and introduce the topic of infrastructure as code. What does that mean? I mean, I know you're going to talk about ARM and bicep, which are Azure specific, but this extends beyond just one single cloud. So maybe you could introduce us to that.
Yeah, so one of the great things about cloud is that we have the ability, specifically with infrastructure as code, to stand up entire environments if you want, really, with code or in an automated fashion. And I think that's one of the great things about having these templates and being able to build your infrastructure in that way. That if you want to just do a demo environment for a demo for a client, and you want to tear it down when you're done, you can do that really quickly, and you can do it in a repetitive manner. So you really get rid of or reduce the amount of human error that comes with manual configurations or building your infrastructure in a manual manner. So it's great that we have those technologies, and especially if you're working with a small team, uh, if your company or the team that you're working on doesn't have a dedicated DevOps person or a dedicated DevOps team, as a developer, having access to some of these tools, it can be a big advantage. So I actually, in a previous project that I worked a couple of years ago, I actually had to uh, work with these templates, and that's how I came up with the idea of this talk. Because as a developer, not having a lot of experience with that kind of code, I bumped my head a couple times with a few challenging things, especially with ARM templates. That's how the idea came up, to save headaches for people that might have to work with these templates or might be looking to create their infrastructure in an automated fashion.
Now you mentioned that this is good for people who do not have dedicated DevOps teams or people with DevOps expertise. How should a developer approach this differently?
So I think that it depends on the tool that you work with. If you were working on Azure, a few years ago, you only had to you would go with ARM templates, and you didn't really have an option. But now you have Bicep, which is the reason why I introduced it. Is from a developer standpoint, it makes a lot of difference, because it really looks like any other programming language, or looks very similar to programming languages. So that's how Microsoft has worked on getting that, making it more accessible for people to actually work with these templates or to stand up this infrastructure. So it really depends on the tool that you use, but the more a good idea from a developer standpoint, it's probably look at a tool that is not as low level, I would say, as ARM templates, which, like I said, can get tricky really fast.
Now I've looked at ARM. I have not looked at Bicep as in depth, and ARM is just JSON basically, if I
Mhm.
recall. Yeah.
Yep.
So what is it about Bicep that makes that makes it that makes it so much more um, accessible, for lack of a better word, by developers?
Yeah, so the right off the bat is that it looks more like a programming language. So if you look at a bicep template,
Hmm.
you can see and you can see the keywords that they are using and the way that the templates are structured. It's a lot more similar to writing a project or writing a program in any other programming language. Whereas, like you said, ARM templates is really JSON, and it can get out of control really quickly, especially if you're deploying a lot of resources. But that's one of the things. Also, it's geared more towards, or it has a lot of features that help you with reusability. So you can break down your deployments or your resources in modules, and you can import modules into other templates and reuse them, and you can share them. So you can put them out in a registry, for example, and kind of like your with your Docker containers, that you can share those Docker containers and have access to those in a remote way. You can share them that way, which is again a lot easier than using your typical ARM template.
So would it be fair to say that ARM is more declarative than and Bicep so does Bicep support things like variables and conditions and things like that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
interesting.
So variables, conditions, iterations. So you can do like a for loops and
Right.
bicep.
Okay.
So that's another one of the advantages too, that you have those things that when you're trying to build your infrastructure can come in very handy.
Okay. So is there so when would you use one over the other? I mean, ARM has its place and Bicep has its place. What are those two? When would you use one? When would you use the other one?
I think personally, if somebody is just starting with infrastructure as code and they have the option, I would go into bicep
Mm,
right off the bat.
okay.
Again, as a developer, if I'm a developer and I'm in charge of, or I'm giving the task of working on automating our infrastructure, personally, I would recommend going with Bicep. I feel like it's going to be the learning curve is not going to be as steep with Bicep than it is with JSON. It will also be easier to understand if you're looking at sample templates. I think it'll be a lot easier to understand what's going on versus ARM templates. At the end of the day, behind the scenes, what you're gonna get is your bicep is gonna eventually get transformed, decompiled into an ARM template because that's the underlying
Right.
infrastructure. But just to work and to put those templates together, I would definitely go with bicep. And obviously if you're looking at resources, or if you're looking at a cloud provider that is not Azure, really the choice is made for you, and you're going to have to go with Terraform or some of the other tools that you have for infrastructure as code.
Now you say that Bicep will eventually be transformed into an ARM template. Is there anything that Bicep can't do that ARM can?
So far, I haven't come across anything
Okay.
that it can do, and that's really the advantage. And really, if you want to stick with ARM templates, maybe if you have already a ton of infrastructure that way,
Mhm.
or if your DevOps team is familiar and comfortable with ARM templates, maybe they don't want to make that transition. But like I said, if you're just getting started, and if you don't have that dedicated team, you probably want to stick with, or you want to get started with bicep.
What are okay? So we talked about when you should use Bicep and when you shouldn't use ARM. When should you not use infrastructure as code?
um I
So I mean, I guess I guess what are the use cases for not using infrastructure as code?
honestly, I haven't come across a case where you don't want to do that, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be a case a scenario where you don't want to use it. But really, what gives you the advantage is being able to do your deployments in a repetitive manner, your infrastructure deployments in a repetitive manner. So unless really there's the only thing I can think of, or the only scenario is if you're not changing your infrastructure that often, or you don't have that requirement of creating an environment on the fly in a really quick fashion, a repetitive fashion, then you probably want to stay outside of infrastructure as code. Or if you don't have the resources to dedicate for someone to learn how to do that, that's really the other scenario where I can think that you don't want to go with that.
Now you mentioned Terraform earlier, which is a was it HashiCorp, I believe, is
Mhm.
the one who makes that, and that is something that you can use on Azure, but you can also use it on multiple. When would you want to? When might you want to use Terraform instead of ARM or Bicep?
So if you are in the situation where you have resources in multiple cloud providers,
Hmm.
I've come across a couple clients that have resources in different providers. That's obviously one scenario where I
Hmm.
can think of. You don't want to really mix and match, Terraform and ARMS and in Bicep. I would say just stay with one language that really can help you do everything. Um, and really, the only other scenario for Terraform, where I wouldn't use Terraform, is being an open source. It's sometimes it might take a little bit longer to get the latest and greatest in Azure. But again, if you're looking to different cloud providers, or you're not married to Azure, you definitely want to stick with or you want to go with Terraform or any other tool out there that supports other providers outside of Azure.
Now, being a Microsoft product, my tools like Visual Studio Code have excellent support for Azure. I know they have great support for ARM. I assume that there are tools out there for Bicep as well.
Yep, yep. Both of them have extensions that you can add to Visual Studio Code, and you can also do it in Visual Studio,
Okay.
where it can help you navigate the ARM templates, or it can help you navigate the bicep templates. There's some really cool things that you can do in Visual Studio Code. For example, you can use the ID from an Azure resource and put in a special function of Visual Studio Code, and it creates the entire bicep template for you just with that ID. And I'm actually going to show that in the presentation in a couple of weeks, along with other tips and tricks that I've come across that will make life easier for anyone that's looking into working with any of these tools.
Awesome. Well, so that's that's about the talk. We don't want to give the whole thing away. What? How about some things like other interests that you have? I mean, we anybody who's a speaker obviously loves tech, but you don't want to do it 24/7. What are some of your other interests?
I'm obsessed and super passionate about soccer. So
Thus your Twitter handle.
there you go. Yeah, so I watch, I play, and I coach my 5-year-old soccer team. So we actually have practice tomorrow. So uh, probably the only other topic or the topic outside of technology that you can get me to talk for hours is soccer. So and then I love watching movies and playing video games, although I haven't had a chance to do that often lately.
Yeah.
But those are the other things, and I have two little ones, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they keep us on
Wow.
our toes. So
I'm surprised.
um,
I'm surprised you have time to to give presentations.
yeah, I have to negotiate with my wife to have the time, but no, yeah, she's great. So she obviously helps me with having the time to give these talks and pursue this passion, which is also sharing information and any chance that I have to save people headaches, that I've gone through while learning these kind of technologies. I'm really passionate about that as well.
Awesome. So, one last question. I generally ask people this. Your first computer, what was it?
Ooh, it was. I'm actually from Mexico, so this is a
Oh.
Lanix computer.
Hmm.
It had one of those operative systems in a big floppy disk where you had to put the floppy disk to get the operating system, and
Hmm.
You had to get a floppy disk out and put whatever programs you
An
wanted
actual
there.
floppy disk.
Yep, yeah, an
Yeah.
actual floppy big ones that kids nowadays will not know what that was. But that was my first computer, and I actually had it for quite a few years before I actually made the transition to a more modern one. But yeah, uh, that was still around at one point. I don't know if my parents still have it somewhere. My dad made the comment that maybe we should send it to a museum or something because it's quite old by now.
And your favorite editor.
I usually go with either Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio. That's where I do my development most of the time.
Now are you now when you're not doing cloud administration, are you .NET, Python, JavaScript?
Yeah, mostly .NET. So
Okay.
mostly Microsoft Stack. I work on mostly web development. That's what I'm working on. And really the other thing that I'm passionate about and other side projects is on AI, cognitive services, Azure Cognitive Services.
Okay, right.
So that's most of my time with technology.
Cool. Well, anything else you want to tell us about yourself or about the talk before we wrap up?
No, just hope that people find the topic interesting. Like I said, I'm gonna share lots of interesting information. So if you want to know a little bit more about infrastructure as code from a beginner standpoint, I'm gonna start with all the basics, and I hope that people find it useful.
Well, I'm certainly going to be interested, and I'm glad that we actually made it through the entire talk, and and the name Chat GPT did not come up once. Um, that's just it's really hard to avoid that some
Yeah,
these days. But
yep, yep, yep.
um, I'm sure Chat GPT can write ARM and bicep templates though, and Terraform and all the other ones. But we're so great. So that'll be again 2 weeks from tonight. Like I said, I had the Bitly link there. That'll go to Meetup, and the talk will be Azure Bicep Knees and Toes Infrastructure as Code for Beginners, and that's going to be Mr. Sam Gomez. Sam, thanks for joining me this evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right.